Good day, everyone. Welcome to another episode of ANZ Salesforce Podcast. Today, I have with me a very special guest, Adam Best. He's a senior program architect from Salesforce. So Adam and I will be talking about the DevOps side of things today. So Adam, thank you very much for coming to my show today.
Thanks for inviting me, Vicus.
You're most welcome. So what we're going to do today, we'll talk about the DevOps, DevOps in general, importance of it, DevOps from a Salesforce space. So it will be mostly like a casual chat. First thing first, right? I mean, the DevOps is a pretty hot topic in today's time, right? Everyone talks about DevOps, not only in the Salesforce space, but in general, right? Any other tech stack. So if I have to ask you what is a DevOps, right? It's to our listeners who never worked with DevOps before.
No, that's a good question. Because I think DevOps is, people, process, and technology all working together. Okay, it's like the engine. How do we get this feature and this capability out to production? And that encompasses a whole range of things across the skills in your team, processes, and also the technology as well.
Right. Okay. All right. That's pretty cool. Now, when it comes to the Salesforce space, right? Obviously, Salesforce is pretty amazing technology. Everything is cloud. Do you think we really need DevOps in Salesforce space?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we see lots of transformations, some small, some large, putting business features out to production, and we've got to drive that. We've got to get efficiencies. So when you've got more than, say, one or two people in a team, then those people need to collaborate. They often need to collaborate on change going out together, or they might need to build change which is going out separately. But either way, we've got to get that change out. And application lifecycle management, which DevOps is a part of,
yep.
Starts when you're looking at designing capability, but it doesn't finish until you get out to production and you're supporting the production users. To get efficiencies, to get developer efficiency, to get speed, to get agility, that's all benefit. That's all business benefit.
Right.
And especially return on investment as well. So
to
keep your costs low, to get efficiencies, DevOps is really important for any size project, program, or digital transformation.
Right. Okay. So in that case, do you think it's safer to say that the core benefit of using DevOps is efficiency, better return of investment? So. Yeah. So if, say for instance, right, I'm a company, I'm the only developer, say small shop. So do you still think that DevOps still plays an important role, or, I do understand, right, if there are more than 2-3 developers, right, it's fantastic, to have DevOps in place. But if you're talking about just one developer, is that?
Well, think about it like this. If you're going to do something twice,
right,
or 3 times or 4 times, if you can automate that, then you're going to get efficiencies on your own time by automating that. So just look at that return on investment. If you think, you know what, I'm going to do this once, then it gets out to production, I'll never have to do it again, then there's no point in automation. There's no return on investment. There's no business value. But if you're doing something that, you say you're going to benefit from automating because you're going to do it again and again. Maybe it's loading test personas into Sandbox. Each time you create a Sandbox, you want a bunch of test personas in there so that you can test features as maybe a support agent or a sales rep. Then each time you create a Sandbox and you load those in, that's something manual that you're doing. I think there's return on investment by automating that.
Right,
Absolutely.
right. Makes sense. So now coming to the Salesforce space, right? I mean, as you said, DevOps is really very important, and obviously, we can see value in having the DevOps. So We talked about the benefits, right? And what about the challenges, right? Do you see any potential challenges with the DevOps? For instance, if in terms of adoption rate, or say, for instance, right, if I run a small, say, Salesforce in-house, right, and I have to say to my business owner, right, I'm gonna propose a DevOps model. So the first question he or she going to ask, right? Can you highlight the challenges with DevOps? So
look, I think as an ecosystem, we've done really well over the last few years. And I think, if you're looking back to maybe 2017, 2018 with the introduction of Salesforce DX, the developer experience, okay? Salesforce saw a need to have more features available via the API for deployment. And that's great. And we're in a really good position today. So, with features available via the metadata API, that allows us to then use that technology for automation. Right. Even things like command line interface, maybe many of your listeners won't know that you can load data via the command line interface, as well as deploy metadata. There's many APIs Salesforce has. Tooling API, command line interface, which is the main one today. Using those technologies, I think, might be the challenge. So, everyone can deploy, but how are we going to deploy? Are we going to deploy a full package? Are we going to deploy deltas? And quite often we can deploy, but then we have to move data as well. So I think the challenge is about getting those APIs and really using them to get that Nirvana deployment, repeatable deployment, so that you can deploy that on the path to production. So I think it just experience, I think.
Right. Yeah. I'm a big fan of the DX, so I use it all the time. It just makes the life so easy. So so it's a fantastic tool. Now, like every other tech stack, right? There are anti-patterns, right? Which is usually will say, "Hey, this you shouldn't be doing this way. This will cause a lot of issues in the future." So have you noticed any anti-patterns in DevOps space, especially when we're talking from a Salesforce perspective?
Yeah, that's a great question. But let me reverse that question. Let's say, hey, what's going to make us successful?
Right. Okay.
So manual steps, I think, is really important to make sure that we minimize manual steps. We've got some APIs. We've got the metadata API. We've got the tooling API. We've got the CLI, the SFDX CLI. We've got to use those. So if you're doing a manual step and you're not using an API to do it, well, that's obviously causing inefficiencies in your pipeline and your deployment process. But you might also get things like environment misalignment, and also you're going to reduce your developer efficiency and your efficiency deploying. So if you think about it, you've got in a larger team and a larger program, you might have 5 or 6 sandboxes before you get to production. So every time you deploy to a new sandbox, and obviously production itself, you've got to do this manual step. So I think the first key is reduce your manual steps, make use of the APIs, commit your code. If you've got reference data, such as custom settings, or maybe you've got a house account or contact that you need for your features to work, commit that code to your source control and make sure that you have that delivered via a CI/CD pipeline. Okay. So manual step, a good developer guide, making sure that everyone in your team knows how you do things as a team. How do I commit my code? How do I get my code out the gate? Maybe we might have a pull request process, having a DevSecOps strategy so that everyone knows, their responsibility and what they should do as a developer. But also, what about those roles and responsibilities on the path to production as well? Who's the deployment lead? Do we have everyone having admin access to a system integration testing environment or a UAT environment, right? And if you don't have admin access, as a developer or tester, what access do I have so that I can do my job? So I think, look, roles and responsibilities, a good operating model, making sure you support the developers with the tools and the processes to suit them. Okay, so if you're a Salesforce consultant, you've still got to know how to use Visual Studio Code if you're in a larger team, and source control, but you're not necessarily in a developer space. So you're not developing LWCs or Apex classes, but you still got to use your application lifecycle management tools to collaborate. Okay.
Yep, that's right. I agree with that. I mean, based on my experience, right? I mean, especially around the DevOps space, right? And using DX, what I've seen, right? Especially since you mentioned Salesforce consultant, who's not going to do the development. So I have noticed, right? People who are new to DevOps, there is a kind of hesitancy, right? They like, it's a little bit tricky. Why we have to use the DevOps model? So to get that, understanding going, right? So yes, you're right. I mean, it's very important to have the process and the roles and responsibilities in place, which actually will outline who will do, right? So that's really a very valid point you mentioned, because the couple of places I worked, we used to have a process framework where a developer has certain responsibility, then we have a pull request, a dev lead has to approve it, or an architect has to approve it, then as a person who will be deploying will be to production will be someone else, maybe a release lead or deployment lead. So yeah, that makes sense. Now, I wanted to drill a little bit more on DevOps. So there are KPIs, right, around DevOps. So for instance, change failure rate, availability. So do you think these KPIs, provides a measure to indicate that whether the DevOps has been successful with the team, or do you think these KPIs are important according to you?
I think the KPIs really are there for looking at not only how successful you are with DevOps, but what's the reason for DevOps, and that's business value. So let's, as I said earlier, you've got return on investment, you've got speed, you've got agility, you've got business continuity, you've got these business benefits that will and business value that will save time and money, and that's why we look at DevOps. We're looking at DevOps to look at efficiencies, so that we can spend more money on building the features, configuring the platform, than deploying the features. And so they're really important. Change, as you mentioned, change failure rate. When I deploy, how often do I have a failure? Okay. And so once you fine tune and fix those failures, which cost time and money, then the next time you won't get that failure. Lead time for change, I think, is an important one. How fast can we, from conception, business saying, I need this feature, how fast can we get that out to production? Okay. So you might have, in your organization, larger enterprise organization, you might have quarterly releases. Some organizations have monthly releases. In Australia, I've seen organizations have weekly releases. These are major releases, so you put any change out because of the maturity of their DevOps. And so what does it take to have that maturity? Well, when you're putting change out, you have to test. If you put a trigger out, that is considered a common component. So you might have to regression test a whole bunch of other use cases that are in production to make sure you haven't broken them. So the faster you go, the higher the maturity need in DevOps, such as automated testing and CI/CD and so on and so forth. Your mean time to restore, mean time to resolve, I think, is an important one. So if you do put a change out to production and there is a production incident, then how fast can you restore that? Okay, so have you got a process in place? Have you got a hot fix process in place? That goes to branching strategy. Have you got a hot fix process in place and a major incident management process in place to get that production incident fixed and quickly?
Yeah, that's right. That makes sense. Another thing I've noticed, right? Advantage of using DevOps, you can integrate with static code analysis tool, where you can actually measure your code, the way the code's supposed to write, the coding standards, and there are a lot of tools out there. I mean, but just an example, right? You can integrate, your DevOps process with PMD. That's one thing, which is, I personally believe that, it helps developer, to improve their code quality along with to bring the efficiency. So that comes to my another question. It's just a very silly question. I mean, people often ask me this, and it's around the version control, right? Obviously, you can choose any version control for DevOps, right? I mean, so you can use pretty much any tool. So, so I've been asked many times, right? Do you have to be expert in version control to use the DevOps, or you can just have a basic understanding of what version control is and then can still good to go with DevOps?
Because that's, no question is a silly question. And so, there's lots of tools that you might use with DevOps. But let me get to your first question, your second part of the question on version control. So version control, I think, is important. Well, let's think what version control is. Version control is collaboration on code. Okay, and so that's two or more people, maybe creating fields or layouts or even Apex classes, then pulling that down to version control and then having that deployed on the path to production. But don't forget about change sets. So if you're just one developer or one admin and you're developing something in a dev sandbox, a developer sandbox, and then you want to get that out to production, we've got a fabulous thing called change sets that's been used by many of our community for many years. But with change sets doesn't support version control, and so when we need to collaborate two or more, I think, then version control is important so that you can have you merge your changes. One person can extend the other person's changes, and also have that deployed onto multiple sandboxes on the path to production. Okay, so I think everyone should, have a base capability of using something like Visual Studio Code, and getting back to tools, Visual Studio Code, version controls built in there. So something like GitHub or GitLab or Bitbucket, which are version control systems, will be used in conjunction with your Visual Studio Code to pull your changes down from your sandbox down to your computer, and then check that into your version control repository. Okay.
Yeah.
And then using something like CI/CD to then deploy that on the path to production multiple times. So you might have an ST, a SIT sandbox, a UAT, and of course something like production as well. So, but Vikas, other tools, as correctly as you said, we've got something called static code analysis.
Yeah.
So static code analysis is testing, using something like PMD. And did you know the SFDX CLI has a plugin called Code Scanner, which uses PMD as an engine? So it's a really cool bootstrap install using the CLI to install that plugin and use that in your pipeline. So that's pretty cool.
Yep.
So static code analysis is looking at your code when it's on a server, so whether that be your computer or whether that be a CI/CD tool, to get low-hanging fruit. Okay, so getting things like DMLs inside for loops, in the category of performance, making sure that your developers will bulkify their code, and many other things, vulnerabilities, maybe escaping public variables, and so on and so forth. Vickers, tools. Sandbox is a tool. It's a great tool. Yes, it's a tool. We use it. Some of our community also uses Scratch orgs. I'm not going to go into that too much today, but that's for package development model. Most of our community are very successful with the org development model. Other tools you might use, API simulation tool to if you have lots of platforms integrated to Salesforce, maybe you have an ESB, maybe you have a few point-to-points. You're not going to have finite platforms down the other end for every developer or every sandbox or environment that you might have for Salesforce. So you might simulate that with an API simulation tool. Some people call it mocking or stubs. You might have automated testing tools. So that's lots of return on investment, regression testing, automating your regression testing. So, so some great tools. Our beloved ISVs in the market have some awesome tools. To name a few, Provar, Trisense, Tosca, Capado has a automated or robotic testing or automated testing part of their suite as well. Think about DevOps is application lifecycle management, is about business continuity as well. So think about backup and restore. And so Salesforce has a BNR. Our ISVs also have BNR. So some leaders in the market, some common names you'll hear are Own Backup and Odeceiver as well. Many tools across application lifecycle management supporting developers, but they also might be supporting other activities as well, like your testing or like your business continuity. Right.
Makes sense. That's cool. That's a very good explanation. Thank you very much for that. Now, so do you have any favorite DevOps tool, right? I mean, there are many out there in the market, so, you might have used, a few, and you might have said, "Oh, this is my favorite tool for whatever reason."
I think, look, tools really support people and process. Okay, and so my favorite DevOps tool might not really be make another person successful or another organization successful.
Fair enough.
So let's think about that. Well, let's think about how can you be successful if you're one admin, excuse me, if you're one admin and you've got just, one sandbox and you're developing in that sandbox, and you might put that change out maybe to a test sandbox just to test your deployment. And then you go out to production. Change sets is great. I'd use change sets. It's an awesome feature of Salesforce. If you're in a larger team, or smaller team and larger team, so maybe you've got 2 developers, 2 admins, maybe you've got 20 build teams, scrum teams. I've been in organizations where they have, quite a healthy build landscape with 20 build teams. Then you might need to look at things like version control for that collaboration on code. So version control, there's GitHub, there is GitLab, Bitbucket. Atlassian's Bitbucket's very, very popular as well. Azure DevOps has its own repos, for version control. So they're the common ones I see in the market today. For CI/CD, again, there's a build versus buy. Do you have the skills in your team to build your own pipeline, where you'd be using a CI/CD tool like Azure DevOps or a Bitbucket pipeline. I'm just trying to think. Blank. I need another coffee. Bitbucket pipeline. I think GitLab is also a CI/CD. You've got GitHub. GitHub has something called GitHub Actions.
Yeah.
So that can be used as CI/CD. If you don't have the skills in your team for that pipeline scripting, then you can go to our App Exchange and get something off the shelf. And common ISVs I see in the market are making our customers successful today. You've got Capado, you've got AutoRabbit, and you've got GearSet, and there are a number of other ISVs with deployment or application lifecycle management apps. So head over to the App Exchange and search for the word deployment, and you'll find all those tools there. And I always say just evaluate those tools. Okay, so have a look at the tool, have a look at the needs of your team, and make a decision. That's going to be right for your team and your organization. So there's no one right decision. Someone says, all right, Adam, should I use something off the shelf from App Exchange, or should we have build our own pipeline? Well, you've got to go back to that people, process, technology. What are the considerations? Considerations of people in team. Do we have the people to script up a pipeline? Or are we just a couple of admins or a couple of consultants in our team where we're more likely going to use something like change sets and or your Capado, your AutoRabbit, your GearSet. Okay, something off the shelf, ready to go. Yeah. And those particular tools from the App Exchange do bake in those other parts of quality checks we talked about earlier, which is your static code analysis and automated testing, invoking automated testing, and automations like that. So
yeah, makes sense. That's pretty cool. Yeah, I mean, I've used initially when I started, right, in Salesforce space, I used to use GearSet, and I really liked it. And then I actually, because I've used the CI/CD on Azure before, not on the Salesforce space, but mostly on the .NET side of things. So transition was pretty easier because it's the same scripting, so it doesn't make much difference when it comes to Salesforce space when you're talking about the scripting side of things. But yeah, I do agree, right? People who are starting out for the first time, right? They have this kind of, I don't understand the scripting. So the tools like Capado, GearSet really, fill that gap, and yet they can get that DevOps experience. So that's just from my personal experience. That's fantastic. Now, obviously, someone wants to start out, first in DevOps space, might have a lot of questions around the resources they can go to learn, especially in the Salesforce space. So do you think, Trailhead is a better place to get started? I mean, from a generic perspective?
Yeah, look, Trailhead is the first place to go, I think, for anything Salesforce. Yeah. So if you head over to Trailhead, you can have a look at, you can search, SFDX or DevOps. There is so the certification, if you look at the prerequisite trail mix, for the deployment designer, my apologies, deployment lifecycle architect certification. They just rebranded the certs to architect. Then there's a great trail mix which will take you through DevOps themed modules. You might learn about Agile. You'll learn about Visual Studio Code and the command line. And you don't have to be a developer to learn about these things. You don't need to, type in command lines to use Visual Studio Code. You can use it with your mouse. You can retrieve things with your mouse. I'm a point to click. I was a developer. I said I'm an older developer, but I still like to use my mouse. And Visual Studio Code is great. And it'll also teach you about testing and a range of other things, and source control. So head over to Trailhead, have a look at certifications and the prerequisite trail mix for the deployment architect cert is a great place to start. You can also have a look at my LinkedIn profile. I have a lot of great featured videos on there. So if you go into LinkedIn and you search for Adam Best, I'm sure there's only one of me in the Salesforce space. Have a look to the featured videos. Lots of featured videos on there around things and topics that we've talked about today.
Yeah.
For some more videos. You can also head across to the Salesforce Plus, and you'll be able to find some videos there as well.
Yeah, I'll put your the LinkedIn link in the description when I post the link later in the future.
Yeah.
That's cool. Thank you very much for that. Appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, I do agree with that certification. That's a very beautiful certification. I think that certification teaches a lot about even the branching strategy as well. And, it touches a bit on GitHub and application lifecycle management. So it's a beautiful certification. So yeah.
And just think about DevOps as just another part of Salesforce that if you learn this area, and you skill up on things like agile and branching strategies and so on and so forth, not just developers, but admins and consultants as well, then it's going to make you, more successful. So just like you're learning flows or other automation technologies, maybe creating fields, objects, learning about DevOps and learning about deployments will make you more successful. Yeah,
that's right. That makes total sense. And at the same time, right? I mean, Salesforce is just one of the amazing technologies out there, and DevOps will add that functionality to your skill set. Like you said, to make you more successful. So yeah, that's right. So yeah, I'm done with my questions today. So thank you very much for your time. It's really been amazing chatting to you today.
Thank you for inviting me. A pleasure.
Thank you.